Welcome to Then and Now, a podcast by the UCLA Luskin Center for History and Policy. We study change in order to make change, linking knowledge of the past to the quest for a better future. Every other week, we examine the most pressing issues of the day through a historical lens, helping us understand what happened then and what that means for us now.
Hello, this is David Myers, host of today's podcast and director of the UCLA Luskin Center for History and Policy. This episode is a joint undertaking of the Luskin Center and the UCLA History Department, together with the Urban History Association, which held its annual meeting in Los Angeles in early October. The Urban History Association and its president, Professor Andrew Sandoval from Penn State, asked if we would co-sponsor a plenary session devoted to Los Angeles. We readily accepted, given our shared commitment to bring historical perspective to bear on the present and the pressing questions of the day. The conversation took place on October 9th at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown LA and engaged two questions. What is distinctive about LA as an urban experience and experiment? And what does LA tell or teach us about urban life at this critical moment in U.S. history? We must take stock of this unprecedented time in which the polarities of Los Angeles, which its great students such as Carey McWilliams and Mike Davis noticed, seem stretched to the furthest point. LA as brilliant sunshine and dark dystopia, as site of opportunity and capital of housing precarity, as once and future home of the Olympics, and as the hunting grounds of masked federal agents. Where is LA at this moment in its relatively short but intense history, and what can we learn from that story? There obviously is no single narrative line, and what our panel offers are four different slices of the story of LA, offered by a wonderful quartet of scholars and innovators. Each of the four presented opening remarks at the conference, after which a conversation ensued, which I was privileged to moderate. I'd like to introduce the panelists in the order in which they spoke. First was Dr. Becky Nicolaides, who is one of LA's leading historians, a consultant, and co-founder of History Studio, a partnership of award-winning scholars providing expert research, script vetting, and original content for the entertainment industry. She's the author of The New Suburbia, How Diversity Remade Suburban Life in Los Angeles After 1945, and was given the impossible task of sketching the arc of LA urban history in 10 minutes.
Okay, it's great to be here and see a lot of friends in this room, and just to be here with my fellow panelists who are all amazing. Well, as David made reference to, Mike Davis famously defined the central dynamic of LA history as sunshine and noir. The sunshine, that relentless booster image of LA as a paradise, the palm trees and the pristine coast, the better city that chose nature and greenery over smokestacks and labor unrest. But that dark noir underbelly was always there in the form of racial oppression, exploitation, militarized urban spaces, and white homeowner movements. And of course, it all sparked two major civil uprisings, the 1965 Watts Rebellion, which we're 60 years out now from that one, and in 1992, the Rodney King Civil Uprising. I mean, there's no question that LA history has embodied both of those threads, and indeed was a trailblazer of both, the boosting and the perfecting the tools that created the unequal metropolis. But I would also suggest that LA history has other things to teach us that move beyond this dialectic and reflect traditions of social justice, of cultural expression and freedom, and inclusive placemaking. And I want to highlight a couple of things that speak to that, I think, in the spirit of this plenary. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about LA as a sanctuary for immigrants and exiles. One can easily tell a story of LA, a history of LA as rife with anti-immigrant politics from the 1930s, repatriation, to Japanese incarceration in the 40s, anti-immigrant backlashes in the 80s, and on and on. But from its urban and suburban emergence in the 1880s, LA has also been a place of sanctuary and refuge. Latino and Asian immigrants have long histories in Los Angeles. They built the city and created communities, from the Japanese families on Terminal Island to the colonias that spread across the county, and to Boyle Heights as a multi-ethnic home place shaped by segregation, but really that became an incubator of democracy and social justice. In the 1930s and 40s, another story of exiles unfolded. This was the influx of Central and European emigres to LA, Jews and leftists fleeing Nazi persecution, artists, musicians, and intellectuals like Arnold Schoenberg, Bertolt Brecht, Fritz Lang, and Otto Preminger. And when Germany invaded France in 1940, others followed, like Igor Stravinsky and Richard Neutra. And as New Yorker writer Alex Ross put it, I love this quote. He said, it was as if the cafes of Berlin, Munich, and Vienna had disgorged their clientele onto Sunset Boulevard. Despite some of them who bemoan the cultural desert of Southern California, others were drawn by that lack of a cultural infrastructure in Los Angeles, which gave them a measure of artistic freedom. And they also found here networks of friendly connections and even some opportunity in Hollywood. Like everything, in this place, this wasn't a simplistic story. Some of them were eventually caught up in the dragnet of McCarthyism during the 1950s and went into exile again, but others stayed and really helped shape LA. After the passage of the 1965 Hart-Celler Act, immigration surged again from Asia and Latin America and truly transformed LA into the global metropolis that it is. The presence of immigrants in LA who contributed so much to the fabric and spirit of this city also summoned the continual need for vigilance around civil rights and protections. And LA responded in powerful ways. After 1980, several regional groups formed to do this work. And LA was, in fact, a national leader in creating an infrastructure for immigrant rights and social services through groups like Churla, Enlon, and Lane. And local communities also stepped up. And this points, I think, to the power of localities and local institutions that have a long history of social justice work in LA, often with roots in some of the more vulnerable areas. So take South Central LA, for example, where a historically Black neighborhood has transformed into a predominantly Latino one, and where a multiracial community has strengthened over the last couple of generations, and they forged cultural and political ties and shared a shared sense of a home place. And then in towns like Southgate, in Southeast LA, which in the 1980s transitioned from white to Latino in the throes of deindustrialization in that entire part of Los Angeles. In that working class suburb, community institutions like public schools became de facto welcome centers for new immigrants. And even in upscale San Marino, which received wealthy Asian immigrants, local groups like the Chinese Club helped to integrate newcomers. These were stories of seasoned immigrants helping the newly arrived. The power of the local, I think, has been so strong in LA as sites of resistance and mutual caretaking. It's something I've witnessed firsthand in my hometown of Altadena, one of LA's most diverse suburbs, grappling with its recovery from the fire. The second thread I want to mention is LA as a workers' rights city. Now, anyone who knows about LA history knows that it didn't start out that way. I mean, early labor history in LA started out pretty bleak, with workers facing many daunting challenges, in a lot of respects, lower wages in many sectors, a really powerful open shop climate up to the 1930s, and geographic fragmentation, which made organizing much more challenging. Fast forward to the 1990s, when LA became the center of a vibrant movement for labor rights and union organizing, and really became a national leader in that arena in this era of economic restructuring and globalization. Labor organizers took a two-pronged approach to achieve this. First, they strengthened public employee unions, and second, they reached out to the swelling number of immigrants, low-wage immigrants in the city, kicking off with that 1990 Justice for Janitors campaign, which really catalyzed a lot of energy around all of this. And that work, too, helped create an infrastructure of social justice in Los Angeles. And it also helped shift the political landscape in LA by 2000. By that point, as Manuel Pastor notes in his very aptly titled book, State of Resistance, LA's racial politics began to simmer down. It leaned leftward and propelled the blue wave in this city and in California at large. Key, too, was grassroots activism that linked community organizing and voter mobilization. And that, too, I think is another important lesson from LA. It's all manifested this past year in the kind of grassroots resistance we've seen in the streets, in our neighborhoods, churches, the parking lots of Home Depots, and the street corners in our suburbs, where vendors selling fruit and T-shirts are trying to make a living, and neighbors are coming out to their defense. LA is a lot more complex and nuanced than sunshine and noir, and I think it's in those gray spaces in between where resistance, progressive suburbanites, and other sometimes surprising realities have risen to demonstrate the power of this place to uphold human rights and democracy. And I'll leave you with one final lesson from LA history. And it's this: when it all starts getting to be too much, take a breath, take a walk, take care of yourself. Starting with Charles Lummis back in the 1890s, people here have been preaching that message for generations. And I hope that you get a chance to do that while you're here and to be well in our beautiful city. Thank you.
Next, we heard from Gustavo Arellano, who is one of LA's leading journalists and a columnist at the LA Times. Gustavo was a finalist for the 2025 Pulitzer Prize in Commentary and was part of the team that won the 2023 Pulitzer Prize in Breaking News for reporting on a leaked audio recording that upended Los Angeles politics. He is the author of Taco USA, How Mexican Food Conquered America. Gustavo is the child of two Mexican immigrants, one of whom came into this country in the trunk of a Chevy. Gustavo traced the arc of LA culture in his remarks, with a particular focus on the distinctive mix of peoples, cultures, and especially immigrants to the city.
Thank you all for being here. First of all, the only news that LA cares about tonight, it's 1-1, bottom of the 11th, Phillies, Dodgers. One out, no one on base. I have this here. Secondly, I don't know what I'm doing here. Seriously, I'm not joking. You're all professional historians. I'm amongst a panel of legends. I'm just a hack columnist from the Los Angeles Times. Even worse, I'm from Orange County, California, lifer. We stand in opposition to everything Los Angeles stands for better or for worse. But I am honored to be here. I think as a columnist, yes, I can talk about the historical context of what LA is with immigrant communities. But as a columnist, I have to talk about the here and now. So I have some short remarks, so bear with me. On July 7th of this year, LA Councilmember Eunice Hernandez joined other political, community, and labor leaders at a press conference in City Hall. The city had just been invaded by Donald Trump. A brigade of migra had swept through historic MacArthur Park in a show of farce, not force, farce. As armed National Guard troops watched on, agents on horseback with a white horse in the middle stomped through a lawn where a children's day camp had sat just moments before. Migra cameramen captured every move of Border Patrol Sector Chief Gregory Bovino, looking every bit the knockoff Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore that he is. Check him out. The government knew exactly what it was doing. They had spent the summer terrorizing Southern California with indiscriminate immigration raids, nabbing undocumented immigrants and citizens alike. Taking over MacArthur Park, a green space that had long been a gathering spot for the city's many immigrant communities over generations, was meant to make LA tremble. Councilmember Hernandez would not have it. Please understand that what's happening here in the city of Los Angeles, we are the canary in the coal mine, she said at the City Hall press conference. What you see happening in MacArthur Park is coming to you, so wake up. It's now early October. Trump is seeking to send a National Guard to any municipality that dares oppose his deportation leviathan. Chicago is now under siege. So is Portland. Others are to come. ICE is about to gleefully accept a cartoonish budget increase. Government shutdown be damned. But thankfully, people are listening to Hernandez's warning. People are listening to Los Angeles. Los buenos, the good ones, aren't backing down to what's happening because LA taught them and is teaching them how to resist. Because LA has united in the name of itself. The popular national narrative, from McWilliams to Davis, I do know my LA historians, Mike Davis, God, rest in power. The popular national narrative about this city is that it's a megalopolis perpetually at war with itself because it's too damn spread out and too damn diverse. It's something I believed before I began to cover the city in depth 5 years ago as a columnista for the Los Angeles Times. From South LA to the San Fernando Valley, Boyle Heights that way to Mar Vista all the way on the coast, and so many other neighborhoods in between all of those, clashes and misunderstandings of all sorts are baked into this city's daily churn. But then came the summer of 2025. This city has stood magnificently athwart MAGA. It has organized and resisted Trump, but let's be real, Stephen Miller. Not because LA is a city of native son from Santa Monica, not because LA is a city of immigrants, but because we know we are the future of this country. It's why all walks of LA life, from donors to street activists, teachers and preachers, Black and white and Latino and Armenians and Persians and Asian, and so many other residents have joined this fight together in a way that LA has never seen. Residents have organized, as Becky said, residents have organized neighborhood watches, literally standing on your street block, going to Home Depots, going to restaurants, buying out street vendors to make sure that they are safe from La Migra. Local media has stepped up. Everyone with a smartphone now is a reporter, offering daily truths to the Trump administration's hourly lies. Food drives and fundraisers keep families fed. As we say in Spanish, el pueblo no se raja. The people do not back down. Because if LA loses this battle, democracy loses. If LA wins, we all do. A better saying, this is from Angelenos. Solo el pueblo salva el pueblo. Only we can save ourselves. This may not be the LA dream of palm trees in Hollywood, but I dare say it's the best dream. Because LA operates at its best when under attack from haters. We have some Angelenos here. It bands together and throws down. And you're seeing it right now, a show of strength and commitment to our multicultural reality that Los Buenos will absolutely know, will one day triumph. Councilmember Hernandez was right to say Los Angeles is the canary in the coal mine. But LA's melody is strong and beautiful. The history shows it. And no goons will ever silence it. So all of you here, learn it, spread it. Because it's not, the song of LA is not always in the key of Cassandra. It's really always, especially, in the tune of Frida. Gracias.
We next heard from Brenda Levin, who is a nationally renowned and award-winning architect and historical preservationist. Brenda and her firm, Levin and Associates, have played a role in the renovation of many iconic buildings and properties in LA, including the Bradbury Building, LA City Hall, the Ford Amphitheater, Wilshire Boulevard Temple, Dodger Stadium, Griffith Observatory, and Grand Central Market.
Okay, so the first thing I've learned is to never follow Gustavo ever again in my life. But I am here to talk about the built environment, and bear with me because I actually have slides and hopefully they will show. Los Angeles is a city of reinvention, but it is also a city of memory written in stone, brick, and steel. Its built environment is not just physical, it's symbolic, and every building tells a story. My work is at the crossroads of those narratives, preserving icons of the past while adapting them to serve the needs of today. In LA, it is both record and prophecy. And from the Bradbury Building to City Hall, these structures hold the civic DNA of Los Angeles. Preserving them is not nostalgia, it is maintaining a vocabulary of civic identity. Los Angeles is a city built on coalitions. Its architecture is never just brick and mortar. It's the product of public purpose, private investment, cultural memory, and civic ambition. I'm going to talk tonight about two projects, Griffith Observatory and Grand Central Market. When Griffith Observatory first opened in 1935, it was a civic gift, a place where Angelenos could come for free to look at the cosmos in the process of their own city. But by the 90s, after 60 plus years of intense use and 70 million visitors, the building needed major infrastructure and programming upgrades. State-of-the-art equipment, concrete was cracking, copper domes had weathered. You'd be seeing these pictures now, but apparently they're somewhere in the ether. The solution came not...
They're showing.
Oh, great. Good job. Thank you. The single most important guideline, actually, there's a slide before this that shows how bad shape it was in. The important guideline for the proposed work was that the observatory continued to appear much as it had in 1935 from the city of London upon arriving at the building. Now you can go to the next one, the pie chart. Or I can. Okay, thanks. Griffith Observatory renovation and expansion was made possible by a combination of public funding and philanthropy combined. In the 1990s, LA voters approved county and city bond measures that secured nearly $60 million. The Friends of the Observatory, founded in 1978 precisely to protect this landmark, stepped in to launch a private capital campaign. The Amundsen Foundation, the Ocean Family Foundation, Leonard Nimoy and Susan Bay Nimoy, among others, all made transformative contributions totaling $30 million. The campaign raised over $90 million, combining city, county, state, federal funding, and private philanthropy. The partnership secured the future of a well-loved, overused icon. Our work included, gosh knows what the next slide might be, 20,000 square feet of the existing building, and that's Grand Central Market, so just hold it there, please. An addition of 40,000 square feet under the front lawn, the repair of the astronomer's monument. So people come for the stars, but also for what the building represents. Los Angeles investing in its own civic identity. The restoration and expansion of Griffith Observatory has renewed one of the most famous astronomical institutions, creating a state-of-the-art civic facility. It re-energized a civic stage where Angelenos looked out at the cosmos and simultaneously back at their city. Now, by contrast, Grand Central Market, since it opened in 1917, the market has been an engine for private enterprise. Its stalls have mirrored the Los Angeles waves of immigration, early on German and Italian entrepreneurs. For over a century, it has been an immigrant entry point, a place where new Angelenos could launch a business with little more than family labor and a good recipe. In 1984, when Ira Yellen, try to get the next slide. Can you advance the slide, please? In 1984, when Ira Yellen purchased the market from the Lyon family, we were retained as architects for the renovation and revitalization. Our role included development of design guidelines for 58 stalls, restoring vintage neon signs, stripping away opening skylights, et cetera, et cetera. There were many challenges. 58 individual business owners of varying ethnic backgrounds and native tongues, code enforcement for a building type which has no precedent, political hoops to jump through, and years of deferred maintenance. While preserving the market's integrity, we incorporated vendors and established a framework for its future. So next slide. So here's a timeline. The market started in 1917. It was originally known as the city of Paris, the Villa of Paris. And then in 1984, when Ira Yellen purchased, when we go into the brown category, the market was still in disrepair. It was struggling in the 80s and 90s. There were two recessions in the 90s and the 2000s. And it really wasn't until 2014 when the market took a turn to become a food hall. We'll call it a food hall now. So if we go to the next slide, you see the market in the market in its new imagery. In the last 40 years, Grand Central Market has become a case study in urban reinvention. Private investors saw the opportunity in the downtown location. They curated new tenants alongside legacy vendors. Interestingly enough, Grand Central Market has always been owned by family businesses. It was the Lyons and then the Yellens and now the Danishkars. So they were able to sustain investment that had enabled the market to weather economic challenges. It has, however, suffered during the COVID shutdown and previous impacts of economic recessions, the writers' strike, and now ICE raids that have challenged the vendors' economic stability and is impacted by the reduced numbers of patrons, part of a downtown decline. In spite of those challenges, the market is vibrant through creative programming, sustaining legacy vendors, and introduction of new vendors. Instagram and social media played a huge role when the market became known for its food focus. In 2013, the opening of Egg Slut on Broadway, in a location vacant for 10 years, generated an immediate influx of patrons and continues to be significant in drawing all generations, reflective of the diversity of LA. There's tension, of course. Reinvestment brings risk of displacement. But Grand Central Market shows us how private capital, when responsive to cultural demand, shows how we can sustain diversity and empower entrepreneurial spirit. It remains what it has always been, a living stage for Los Angeles changing demographics, and it adapts and is resilient. So neither of these projects happened in isolation. They required coalitions, public and private partners, developers, cultural institutions, philanthropists, and city agencies. In Los Angeles, partnerships are not just about financing mechanism, they are civic negotiations. They determine how the city balances preservation with innovation, equity with economics, memory with progress. So what does Los Angeles teach us about urban life? It teaches us that cities are not only built by bulldozers and cranes, but by cultural imagination and by respect for history. It teaches us that preservation is not backward-looking. It is an engine of resilience, inclusivity, and continuity. The built environment here is both memory and possibility, reminding us that design, when coupled with partnership and equity, is the foundation of civic identity in a constantly changing city. Thanks.
And last but not least, we heard from Raphael Sonenshein, who is recognized as one of the most astute observers of LA politics and governance. For many years, Rafe was a professor in the California state system, first at Fullerton and then at Cal State LA, where he directed the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs. He was both an award-winning scholar and a public servant as executive director of the Los Angeles Charter Reform Commission. Since 2023, Rafe has served as the executive director of the John Randolph Haynes and Dora Haynes Foundation, which has allowed him to make the salutary transition from asking for money to giving out money. Rafe spoke to us about the arc of politics and governance in LA.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. LA continually surprises you how small it is in many ways. I walked 5 blocks from my office today because I was hungry for lunch and went to the Grand Central Market for lunch. Egg slut. I'm sorry, but that's what it's called. Wonderful egg sandwich, but that's LA for you. So what does LA teach us about politics and government? I want to talk about something very important to me and to the Haynes Foundation where I work, which is about urban reform and home rule. Because as it turns out, this historical story is going to have a lot to do with the world we're in right now, with what's going on in America's cities, as Gustavo was mentioning. I grew up in New Jersey, and we used to talk about reformers a particular way. On the East Coast, reformers used to be called goo-goos, which was short for good government, a term of contempt for upper-class people with nothing better to do than to show up at civic meetings and rail against the party bosses for how government could be done better. That's what I grew up thinking urban reform was. Then I moved to California and moved to Los Angeles and actually saw urban reform as it really could be. As Amy Bridges, a well-known scholar, pointed out a number of years ago, the urban reform movement really never took off on the East Coast and the Midwest. It took off on the West Coast and in the Southwest. And of those places where it took off the most, it was in the city of Los Angeles. And to this day, Los Angeles remains at the pinnacle, for better or for worse, of the whole issue of urban reform. What is urban reform? It is the prayer and the hope that people can make the choice to improve the government they live under democratically, a choice we do not have with the structure of the national government, which is almost impossible to change. But it turns out it is possible to change the government where you live. And that has become a preoccupation of people in Los Angeles for well over 100 years. And I want to give you a little bit of that history, but mostly talk about what's going on with urban reform right at this moment in Los Angeles and how it affects the situation literally of having armed troops on our streets. 100 years ago, in 1925, the city implemented its most famous city charter, which continues to be in effect today, with a major set of changes in the 1990s that I was honored to be a small part of. And before that, LA had already marked out its territory as a pioneer in using home rule to give people democratic choice at the local level. In 1879, California became one of the first states to provide home rule to its local governments, which is a remarkable development. For the first 100 years, cities and towns and counties were basically servants of the state government. LA City couldn't wait to take advantage of that, and in 1888 created its first charter. They finally let counties do that in California in 1911, and LA County the next year became the first county in the United States to have its own charter, a constitution where they could design their own government. And after that, and even before that, LA began to innovate in progressive reforms before anybody else. LA had nonpartisan elections, later adopted by the state of California. LA had the recall to remove elected officials. By the way, if you want to scare an elected official in California, don't say there's a mouse in the room, just yell the word recall, and they will absolutely freak out. In fact, LA was always in the forefront of this progressive reform movement for better and for worse, because what you discover is that urban reform is a prayer, it's a hope, and sometimes it will also break your heart. Because the reform you put in today in 20 years may be the reform you have to undo with a new reform. In 1938, LA became the first major American city to utilize the recall by removing the mayor of the city, Frank Shaw, for corruption. It remained the biggest story in recalls until the recall of Gray Davis. Decades later, nobody could find another example to talk about, so I loved talking about that one. We also discovered that in getting rid of Frank Shaw, the city decided to make it harder to get rid of the police chief because the mayor had been interfering with the operations of the police department in a corrupt manner. So the police chief was given civil service protection. Those of you who remember Darrell Gates will understand that after a number of decades, that wonderful reform turned out to be a catastrophe. And in 1992, after the civil unrest, Mayor Tom Bradley led a major charter reform effort to remove the civil service protection from the chief. It's, in my view, the greatest achievement of modern Los Angeles government was getting rid of Daryl Gates. But it had to be done through a change in the Constitution, through the charter of the city, ratified by the voters, a remarkable development. And then in the 1990s, the city was faced later in the 90s with another crisis of secession, where the San Fernando Valley and the harbor were thinking of leaving the city of Los Angeles, 40% of the population. And the city then undertook a major charter reform to solve or address one of the fundamental reforms needed to solve the reforms from before, which is too much dispersed power in governance in Los Angeles. Mayors that were too weak in terms of their office, and the mayor was greatly enhanced in authority in that. And that brings us up to today. It's always a crisis that sets off an exciting charter reform in Los Angeles and anywhere else. It could be secession. It could be Daryl Gates, who was a one-man crisis. It could be a corrupt mayor, Frank Shaw. In this case, you've all heard, by the way, you always hear all the bad stories nationally because my relatives always call me and ask me if I'm okay. And I say, yeah, it's nice out. As Becky points out, it's a beautiful day. I'm just fine. Nothing's happening. Recordings were released of City Hall leaders using abusive, racist, horrifying language against their colleagues of other racial and ethnic communities. And that set off what is now going on, which is an epic level of governance reform in the city of Los Angeles. The city is in the midst of a charter reform commission that will probably be succeeded by another commission after that. And LA County, not wanting to be left out of this, has now undertaken the largest reform probably in American county history, which is the change of its entire form of government to have an elected county executive and a larger board of supervisors. I will tell you, just because I work at the Haynes Foundation, that we proposed that 49 years ago. So it's a way of saying for the young people in the room, it'll only take you 49 years. So just stick with it, and sooner or later it will happen. But now I want to tell you what this all means for the world we live in right now. Because what urban reform is really about at its best is a reconstitution at the local level of the limitations of our ability to affect the national government and how it makes decisions. Have you ever tried to get rid of the filibuster? Have you ever tried to figure out what the United States Senate is doing or the Supreme Court? You realize the obstacles to those structural changes. And then you look around you and you discover that home rule is almost a kind of a miracle that we don't pay attention to. We live in our communities. We don't live online. We don't live by following the news of what outrage has happened from Washington. We live because we go outside and talk to our neighbors and our friends. We assess whether crime is out of control by looking in our neighborhood to actually see how it is. We don't need people to make up numbers about the situation. And I believe, in my view, and I'm proud of LA for better or for worse, being at the forefront of this notion of home rule, that it is perfectly possible that local governance and the ability to change our rules democratically may be an overlooked firewall for our democracy. And I think Gustavo was highlighting, when you hear resistance, resistance emerges from people who know each other face to face. Remember face to face? I mean, those of you who are right now checking the news to see if something horrible has happened, actually, the most important interaction you can have is not with your phone, but with a friend, a neighbor, or someone else. And you can also ask who's in trouble and needs help. Who's about to be picked up by ICE? Who is about, could it be somebody you know, perhaps? Or you know someone who knows somebody? It is not easy to conquer American cities. And the reason is that we live a different life as residents of a city than we do as residents of a nation. As residents of a nation, we are consumers of news. It's hard to act on it. At the local level, you can go to the city and see your city council member and scream at them for being a complete jerk on the last thing that they did. You can go to a public meeting. You can join a neighborhood council. It is an element of almost Jeffersonian democracy that we have completely lost track of. And it may, at the end of the day, be our salvation. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I must say, there were many surprises in what we heard, two of which I will highlight. First is that I expected to hear from you all a very somber, sober, solemn report on the state of our city. And to a person, you all offered in your own ways narratives of possibility, of hope, of possibility for positive change. That was at a macro level surprising. I must confess that I did not expect that one of the sources of great positive hope and change in Los Angeles would be home rule. That sort of doesn't usually rise to the surface. LA as the site of sunshine. But I want to begin by asking you, Rafe, about this very proposition that you put on the table, which is really a form of bottom-up democracy in its unadulterated form, and connected to a conversation we had before we began when you compared New York to Los Angeles. You said, as we were talking about the Mamdani candidacy in New York, you were saying that notwithstanding that, New York is a more conservative political organism than Los Angeles. And I wonder if you could explain what you mean by that in comparative terms. So New York is on the verge of electing a Democratic Socialist as mayor. You, I suppose, would juxtapose to that the home rule process, this sort of pure form of, well, somewhat pure form of direct bottom-up direct democracy. So where do you see LA as a counterweight to New York in this regard?
So LA and New York are always in this odd embrace with each other that is both a heavyweight championship bout and a friendly interaction, because there's so many people back and forth between the two. A lot of my work before I was in charter stuff was about interracial coalitions. And what I wrote was that LA had succeeded where New York had failed. That New York, because of its strong traditional party organizations that are in their own way conservative in local politics in a lot of ways, didn't have the open possibilities for intergroup relations that Los Angeles had. And as a result, New York has generally favored conservative mayors over liberal mayors. Right now is, of course, an exception. Obviously an exception. There have been a few liberals elected in New York, but in Los Angeles, it's the exact opposite. Ever since Tom Bradley's election in 1973, the election of a conservative mayor or even a moderate conservative mayor is the exception, not the rule, because liberalism is stronger here than it is in New York City. And it has a lot to do with that over time, I think party systems and party organizations become more about preserving the status quo than about change. And party organizations were never that strong out here. They call them party machines, but it usually means 2 or 3 people in a garage who have been elected to a few offices. In New York and Chicago, they really are talking about political machines.
I remember when we moved out to Los Angeles, we were told, well, here's another refugee from the East Coast. And what you need to know is Los Angeles does not have the same degree of social and political stratification that New York does. That was sort of the truism, right? And it seemed to be a truism and almost a platitude. You're suggesting it's actually verifiably, empirically true.
Also, the food, I think, is better. I'm just saying. I moved to Los Angeles and decided I was going to go to work for Tom Bradley because I thought he was great. I never met him. So I walked into City Hall and somebody hired me as an intern on the 23rd floor. A year later, I was working in political campaigns. Mm-hmm. If I had tried that in New York, there would have been a few questions they would have asked. Who do you know? Yep. Who sent you? Or as they famously said in Chicago, don't send me nobody, nobody sent. Nobody asked me a single question about did I have a relative or was there a reason I was in the room? They just said, are you willing to work hard and go to it? So anyway, it's a completely different.
What does that say? I'm just curious to know, what does that say about the state of graft in LA politics? The state of graft in LA politics.
The state of graft.
Because
people, I must say, my East Coast friends do argue that graft is much better on the East Coast than the Midwest. What we consider corruption would be, I think, considered sort of a modification of pretty good behavior in those systems, I would guess.
Okay. So, Brenda, the public-private partnership that you talked about, given what you know about the ways of the world and the country, is that distinctive to Los Angeles, the nature of that, successful deployment of private capital in the name of good public service and acts and deeds?
So first I want to follow Rafe because I came from New Jersey as well, more recently from Boston. And when I moved to LA, I thought, this is a weird place. I don't understand it. But I came to the same conclusion that Rafe came to, which is if I had stayed in Boston, I'd probably still be designing toilets for some mega hotel in, I don't know, China. And so my experience and my ability to start a firm in 1980, when I had just become a licensed architect, could never have happened anywhere else. Could never have happened anywhere else. And the fact that I fell into preservation as one aspect of my career also probably never would have happened anywhere else. So New Jersey did well by us moving here. I think what was unique about the Griffith Observatory is it's beloved by everybody. It's known by everybody. It's visible from the 110 freeway. It's visible 360 degrees. It's free. It is the one building that is emblematic of what its mission is. The domes tell you that it's an observatory. The building tells you that it's an observatory. So in terms of creating a civic entity that really wanted to preserve that building and preserve the integrity of it, but also the future of it as a free facility for Angelenos. Of course, the movies have made it famous as well. It's such an icon. So I think what was unique was in the public-private partnership was that $60 million is federal county money, mostly county, city, state. The $30 million is private. So there are names of people that you know and some that you don't that all contributed to that $30 million. And the project actually paused when the city and county were only allocating $40 million to the project before the last bond issue. That's when Photo Friends of the Observatory came into the equation and committed to raise the additional funds. So I think it was a unique project. To use it as a model, I'm not sure. I think, if you had the same feelings about some other really, truly iconic building that was for public good and public astronomy and was free and open to the public, perhaps. But I think it was a pretty unique situation.
And similar partnerships and alliances enabled the rise of the Music Center and the County Museum. That's some similar kind of partnership between private capital and
donors.
And donors, yeah.
Good old donors.
Donors, yeah. So all of this sounds too good to be true, Gustavo. Sounds like LA is this idyllic site of harmony and profound direct.
LA is hell.
Oh, you read Mike Davis?
So, right. So what's going on in this conversation? I mean, I have a couple of questions for you, but one, I'm just wondering, where does the rub enter the story? Because much of what we've heard, public-private partnership and home rule as a form of bottom-up direct democracy, I mean, these are undeniably true. And yet we know there's much that's dysfunctional. There's much that's deeply stratified. There's much inequality. There's much housing precarity in Los Angeles. And how do we mediate between these two rather extreme positions?
I truly do believe 2025 has been
a year of possibility, if not outright transformation for Los Angeles, because the stratification is real. The fights are real. You saw that at the very beginning with the fires in Palisades and Altadena, with the reaction, it could have been a civil war between the mayor, Karen Bass, the LA Fire Department. Those tensions were rising, and you still see those tensions going on in the attack on the city government, specifically against Mayor Bass. Following a couple of years of political turmoil with the tape leak scandals, following a good decade of the issue of the unhoused crisis that has been plaguing Los Angeles, arguably Los Angeles was the birthplace of the homeless crisis. As you the LA Times did a big piece about it a couple of months ago, as LA being the home of what we now consider to be the homelessness crisis, going back to Skid Row. So LA will always be that tension. This is no kumbaya city, but I think especially what I'm seeing right now as a columnist, that it's not just one rate, it's continuing, and it's going to get worse. Everyone knows it's going to get worse because ICE is going to get that big humongous allocation coming from the government, a federal agency like no other has ever seen. But one thing, especially as an outsider, that at first I thought it was funny, but now I respect it, is the pride that Angelenos have for Los Angeles. Because I travel around the country. Yes, I'm in another life, and still to this life, I write about Mexican food. So I get to travel all around the country. And because I'm a political beast, I was trying to learn a little bit about the politics. And the Angeleno pride is a thing unto itself. New York has its pride, Jersey, Boston, all that. But LA, the rest of the country truly, especially in modern day LA, despises it. It despises it. And so at first I thought that pride was a sort of insecurity in and of itself. But now I get it. It's like, no, we really, truly love this multicultural city. And just knowing the history, that was not Los Angeles for decades. Honestly, I mean, this is a city that redlined. This is a city that massacred Chinese. This is a city that beat up Mexicans and blacks and Russians for dressing in zoot suits during the zoot suit riots. This is the city that, I mean, as recently as, what was it? It was 2001. Was it 2001 when Villaraigosa lost to Jim Hahn? 2001, where a city was uncomfortable with electing a Latino as a mayor of Los Angeles because this is not a prop. This is what I have. Because he belonged to a group called Mecha, which was seen to be radical and insurrectionist and Chicano. So seeing this 2025 and really seeing the city unite and saying, no, Trump, no anti-immigrant goons, we're not going to let you carry off the tamale lady and the taquero. And that not just Latinos, by the way. In the local media, we've told stories of Persians who have been here for 40 years being deported back to Iran. Like, damn it. Like, people have truly been disgusted. And I see that as a hope to finally solve the riddle of Los Angeles. I mean, I mean it. What unites Los Angeles? Chaos. What unites Los Angeles? The idea that it's going to be destroyed. It's never going to be perfect. And maybe that's not the best way to build a better world. But damn it, it's LA's way.
Apropos LA 5, the Dodgers won in the 11th inning 2-1.
Dodgers won. Cubs ahead 3-0 for you Midwesterners.
So it's so intriguing to hear your sort of account of how, the erstwhile stratification and deep structural racism gave way to something else, a kind of messy intermingling. And that is, I have to say, one of the things I most love about your columns, the bilingualism of them. Like, very few people can pull that off. I think of Gloria Anzaldúa, La Frontera, Borderlands, like that merging that seamless merging of two cultural traditions into something that a kind of alloy that's stronger than each of them individually. Can you speak about that? Like, is that something you think about, or you just do it naturally? I mean, is it a political program, or is it just the way you write? And what does it say about LA? I mean, what does it say about your readership or your audience that you can pull it off?
I mean, it's all of it. And look, LA did not create multiculturalism. New York did. I grew up listening to Howard Stern. So how does a child of Mexican immigrant know so much Yiddish and Italian? It's because that's what the conversation was in LA, like oy vey and shishkas and marom and all that stuff. And when I tell that to people, people get offended, but I don't care. So New York created that multiculturalism. It wasn't always the case in Los Angeles. You could read the history books and see, I mean, the blowouts in 1968, when you had Chicano, 15,000 Chicano students walk out of schools for a better education. Part of their plank was, we want Mexican food in our school cafeterias. We want tacos, we want tostadas, we want tamales, and that might seem cute and, curious, but no, they were fundamentally saying this city needs to change. This city is not reflecting who we are. And now the city of today, it is so like, if you're not eating, if Korean food is not part of your life, something's wrong with you. LA is such a beautiful city that every single party has to have a box of Portos. And Portos is this beloved Cuban bakery that sells pastelitos, fried potato croquettes. It doesn't matter who you are. It could be, like a party wherever, and even in Orange County now. That is in LA. LA is also a city. I mean, the real food of LA, it's not tacos, it's not Korean barbecue, it's the hamburger. It really is. Whether it's your Tommy's, whether it's your In-N-Out, which is overrated, by the way, whatever it is, like it is. And so to me, that is I don't know. Being in Orange County, again, there's a stereotype about Orange County. I'm not going to talk about it, but it's not real. So the idea of multiculturalism, I grew up with it because that's what I was. And my family, my dad's side of the family, they're mostly in East LA and Montebello, which is a city right next to unincorporated East Los Angeles, and a little bit of the San Fernando Valley. So going up here, I had to read history books to learn that LA at one point was racist. I had to learn at one point that up to 1960, LA was like one of the whitest cities in the United States, one of the most Protestant cities in the United States. And I try to tell that to students now, and they just cannot comprehend it. You mean LA at one point was not, at least not a multicultural paradise, but at least in conversation with each other? And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think that's a positive thing. And that's what gives me the hope that we can get over what we're going through right now.
Okay, I just have to say a word about Korean food, about which I am no expert. I once did a series at UCLA on Jewish food, and the last speaker in the series was the late, great Jonathan Gold.
May he rest in peace.
Blessed memory. He told us a lot about the sort of melange of pastrami and the taco in East LA, and how that became kind of this fascinating metaphor for culture intermingling. It turns out he spent a lot of the evening talking about the glories of pork, which cleared out about 2/3 of the audience. But amongst those who stayed behind, like to the bitter end, was a octogenarian European-born Jewish woman who was going toe-to-toe with Jonathan Gold on the best Korean barbecue dives in Los Angeles. It was an astounding experience, which I'll never forget. They were really going back and forth. No, that's, this small place that nobody's ever heard of is really the best. And it was such an LA moment. The woman, I believe, was a Holocaust survivor, and she was talking about Korean barbecue dives with Jonathan Gold, which sort of says so much about what cultural literacy means and looks like, and culinary literacy for that matter.
On that note, really quickly, I mean, a couple of years ago, a man named Art Laboe died. Art Laboe was an Armenian, son of Armenians, who ended up becoming beloved by Chicanos because he would play black rhythm and R&B songs on the old Carol A. That is LA for you, right there in a song.
Yeah. Okay. I want to conclude. We'll see if we have any time for your comments and feedback. I want to conclude, at least what my questions to our panelists, by asking Becky about both a concept that I think was developed in that gray area that you spoke of, and which you yourself know so well from recent experience, and that's the idea of resilience. LA is a site of resilience. You know it very, very well because of your own personal experience in losing your home in Altadena. And I wonder if you can reflect through your own personal prism on resilience as a characteristic feature of life in Los Angeles. If that's something that you, in fact, see as an historical feature of dwelling in that interstitial space between sunshine and dystopia.
Okay, that's a big one. Yeah, I mean, it's I find myself this year like living through history in a way that I've never felt before in my life, having lost our home in the fire. And we're sort of witnessing our community, our really the place that we've loved a lot, the community of Altadena, trying to bounce back from this. And I mean, it's a really difficult road. It's not, I can't say there's consensus. I've been to tons of community meetings and there's arguments about how to do this, but I think there is a unity in wanting to sort of keep what was amazing about Altadena, which was its diversity, in terms of the Black community there, Latinos, whites. There was class diversity, all of that, and it's something that's slipping away, I think, in a way that is sad to see. But there's a lot of people that are hanging in there and trying to like stop that from happening, and trying to make sure that people can build back in a way where we don't lose that. We don't lose what was amazing about our community up there. Is this resilience like typical of something in LA history? I don't know. I mean, maybe. I think I find myself these days wanting to lean in to the more positive stories from history. We could have spent this whole panel, like you said, kind of leading into the noir, the darker chapters of LA history. God knows there's a lot of those chapters. But I feel maybe it's just where I'm at in my own life that, taking inspiration from moments in history where people are doing something right, where they've sort of found ways to live together, in difference, to be supportive of one another, even, across all kinds of different lines of identity and all of that. So I don't think I've answered your question, but I think it's hard also to go after this dude. But, I do want to, now that I have the mic, I want to ask Rafe a question back about home rule, because you said one line which really struck me, and I've thought about this too, that local governments may be an overlooked firewall in our own time. And when you say that, do you think too of these small governments, like the little suburbs, the Southgates and the Altadenas, or how does that manifest? And I mean, for a long time, I think as urban historians, we've often understood home rule as being a sort of device of protectionism and defensiveness, and promoting segregation and inequality and NIMBYism and all that stuff. But how does home rule sort of play out in this moment that we're in, and how can these local governments be a force,
It's a great question. You should know that Becky is one of the experts on Southeast LA. A lot of her work on these overlooked communities. I actually think it's even more true in the smaller communities than in the big city. And when I talked about running into your council member in the grocery store, that happens in Southgate. Mm-hmm. That happens in small communities, including even unincorporated territories like Altadena. The problem is their home rule is often undeveloped, or it only takes the form of blocking housing and things like that. There's certainly a dark side to home rule in a lot of ways. The bright side is learning the habits of democracy at the local level. How many times do we take our students out to a city council meeting and they get demoralized? We don't run our meetings very well. They're pretty boring in a lot of ways. But there's all kinds of ideas floating around LA about different ways to engage people at the local level through things that are not so restricted as, the way a public meeting has to be organized. And I think we should pay attention to the smaller communities, because I grew up in a town of 33,000 people, and we really got to go to City Hall, and we got to participate in things. Those were the first political experiences I had. We didn't have online, so I couldn't scream about what was happening in Washington. I was in Nutley, New Jersey. So there's a lot of those cities. So there's 88 cities in LA County. LA is by far the biggest, but there's a lively life in each of these cities. But I think we have to push it farther, Becky, and make it a place that's a seedbed for democratic training and activity. And we've missed the ball on that. I think we've missed the potential of home rule to do that.
Well, we have all been immersed in a world of profound challenge and fear and darkness for months and even years, stretching from October 7th to the present moment. And in that regard, I want to just reiterate how refreshing it is to engage, albeit in conditional and qualified terms, with the possibility and hope and promise to which you've all given voice, drawn from your own immersions in the historical lived experience of Los Angeles. And I want to thank you for what turned out to be a really fascinating panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Then and Now, a podcast by the UCLA Luskin Center for History and Policy. You can learn more about our work or share your thoughts with us at our website, luskincenter.history.ucla.edu. Our show is produced by David Myers and Rosalind Campbell, with original music by Daniel Reichman. Special thanks to the UCLA History Department for its support, and thanks to you for listening.